What is an excuse to call off of work that a boss can't argue with? 1. I was still newish at the company at the time. I'd worked there for 6-7 months, and then I got sick. My coworker found me collapsed in the server room, running a ridiculously high fever, and took me to the hospital. He let everyone know. They were understanding, and I was allowed to work from home for a while to try to get better. I didn't though, and I collapsed again. My parents got me admitted to the hospital. I was pretty out of it and barely able to talk, but thankfully it was the weekend. I thought it was still the weekend when my cell phone rang. Since I couldn't talk, my mom answered. We sorta sound alike on the phone. 2. My boss launched into I know you're sick, but I need the project files for this project that I wasn't working on, and I'm not sure where they are. My mom let him know that she'd ask me, but I was barred from working from the hospital because they were trying to figure out why I kept needing blood transfusions, why I had lost almost 50 pounds in 2 months, why my hair was falling out, why I could barely walk/talk/eat/drink. They wouldn't even let my mom bring me my Nintendo DS to cure the boredom. She let him know which hospital I was at, my room number, etc. if he wanted to come visit or if my coworkers wanted to send me anything. I had a room full of flowers, teddy bears, cards, books, everything the hospital gift shop could come up with because my boss said he felt horrible for not realizing how sick I was. I was diagnosed with lupus during my 10-day vacation, and was finally cleared to go back to work 5 weeks after I was released. My entire team treated me like I was glass for a few months afterwards, but any time I looked even too tired, they sent me home to rest so I didn't get sick again. I loved my team. There aren't many corporate bosses that'd go that far for a new employee. 2. My first job was at a department store that's no longer in business, similar to Kohl's. One of the rules we were told in training was that if we needed to call out of work, there were only 2 acceptable reasons for doing so: illness or a family emergency, and only ourselves could call. They were very emphatic on this. I'm a type 1 diabetic and ended up in diabetic ketoacidosis and a diabetic coma, resulting in a week in the ICU. My mom called my employer to let them know I wouldn't be able to cover my shifts for that week and maybe longer. They told her only I was allowed to call myself out and she must put me on the phone to do so. Mom calmly replied, well, there's a problem with that. As she's in a diabetic coma and unconscious, they pretty much had to accept my excuse for calling out and my mom doing it for me after her reply. 3. This just happened last month. I got off work, went home, had dinner and went to bed early. As soon as I laid down, my heart went crazy. It was beating uncontrollably. I got up to go into my living room and went right to the floor. I was sweating, had sensations in my arms and got very nauseated. My landlord called an ambulance and I texted my boss saying that my heart was beating uncontrollably. I was sick and being rushed to the hospital. Turned out that I was diagnosed with AFib and hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. The doctors and nurses were amazed that I didn't have a stroke. I called off several days and actually my boss and my employees were relieved that I was finding out what was wrong with me, since in the weeks leading up to my being rushed to the hospital I wasn't feeling well and they were getting very concerned about me. Now I'm learning how to live life with a heart failure diagnosis and AFib, and everyone at work is extremely understanding on days when I'm not feeling well and can't make it into work. I'm extremely blessed with their concern and understanding, as finding out all this about my health has been quite overwhelming for me. 4. I was fostering a dachshund once. He woke up on the wrong side of his crate, I guess, because there he was at the side of my bed barking and snarling at me. I set my feet down and he went for them. I literally could not get out of bed because a 14-pound dachshund was keeping me there. I called my daughter, told her to knock on the inside door 2 rooms away so he would run to that door and I would get his crate set up at the bedroom door to catch him in it when he ran back to bite me. It didn't work. He held his ground. So she came in the door and called him. Brave girl! ! He did walk away from the bedroom far enough to see who was there, and I set the crate in the bedroom doorway and he snapped back at me while charging the crate. I called the owner, who was a vet tech that had saved him from euthanasia due to being vicious, information that was withheld from me, and was hoping to have the foster parent bring him around so he could be adopted. Yeah, well, she lived 5 hours away and I told her I was bringing him back and would be there in 2 hours. I was not the person for this one. She was actually angry. I can only imagine how red-faced everyone was at the office after my supervisor said I wasn't coming into the office due to a dachshund standoff, but I know they all had a good laugh. I heard about this for a couple years afterward now and then. Just another type of foster fail. Lol. So, I guess if you make him or her laugh hard enough you might avoid the argument. 5. Some bosses will argue with any excuse, even an ambulance crew. I worked for a company that had a completely separate building, a parking lot with inside entrance. The front of the building had the main entrance, and the alley side had a door into the shop which was also the security entrance. December 4, 2010 was a Saturday and I was the only person scheduled in the office that day, rotation. The day before, one of our guys was absent because he had slipped on ice at the parking lot door. I was told that ice melt had been put down. There was no new snow or rain Friday night. Well, as I was walking past the front door, heading to the security entrance, I slipped on ice. I fell hard, landing on my tailbone, then hips, back and head. Next thing I remember is that I was freezing. As I laid there, I could hear vehicles passing by, no one stopped. So I reached out to the corner of the doorway to pull myself onto my side, then realized that I was now laying on my cell phone and couldn't call for help. Thankfully, a guy pulled up and asked if I was okay. Then he called 911, waiting until they arrived. Turns out he saw me fall, drove home, then came back to check on me. I truly believe he saved my life. After the EMTs put on the neck brace, got me on the backboard, and into the ambulance, I asked them to get my phone and call my boss. He went ballistic. They finally used the speaker for me to talk to him. I explained the building was still secure. He demanded I get in there and run the office. The EMTs told him not happening and ended the call. Got me to the hospital where we found a broken vertebrae, bruises in all areas of contact, and traumatic brain injury, TBI. Unfortunately, the docs were more concerned with my back and ignored my head. I will always have neuro damage to my left eye, permanent vertigo and motion sickness. I live on meclizine, and tinnitus. The orthopedist put me in a Jewett brace and kept me off work for 2 months. My boss's response? First he tried to block workers' comp because I hadn't clocked in, even though the accident was on his property and I was arriving for work per my schedule. My ortho, on the second visit, didn't give an exact date to return to work. Although the form said until authorized, my boss scheduled me to work the next day, because there was no specific date listed. When I refused to go, he had his attorney tell workers' comp I refused to return to work. I had to get an attorney to fight it. My ortho was pissed. When I was finally okayed to work half days, still wearing the brace, he alternated mornings and afternoons. After 2 weeks, when I hadn't quit, he laid me off because it's our slow season. Liar. 3 days later he had my position advertised. I called and the receptionist hung up on me. Yet according to him, he's an ultra-religious, compassionate guy not.